Let's continue the franchise with Cars RACE O RAMA. So here you continue to play as Lightning McQueen and his rival Chick returns to cause some trouble, but this time he has his minions with him. Your goal throughout the game is to go from area to area, beat some races, beat these minions to then beat Chick himself. I still haven't watched any Cars movie, but just based on the fact that RACE O RAMA has a story compared to Matter National, that alone makes it a much better game. Because there is an actual threat in here, and that alone gives Lightning a reason to race around, and thus the game has more of a reason to exist. Since Rainbow Studios was gone for RACE O RAMA, Incinerator Studios took care of this one, and I bet they looked at what Matter National was, didn't like it, and went back to what the original Cars game was. And yeah, they did a fine job, especially considering that the budget supposedly was a bit on the lower side, and they had to reuse the assets they had from Rainbow. What also contributes to this game being far better than Matter National is that the characters have, well, they have character, because if they didn't, the story would fall flat. Mainly McQueen, because here he returns to being his cocky self, especially in combination with Chick as his rival. Since I never watched the movies, I don't know if these characters are new or they already appeared in the movies, but they are actually quite fine. Some of them were even quite entertaining to watch, but they don't seem fleshed out enough. Main reason is because while these new characters have personality, outside of McQueen, Chick and maybe even Matter, they still boil down to just a one and done. Sure, they leave an impression, especially the spoiled girl and her father, but I think Incinerator Studios could have done a bit more with these. The game was released on multiple consoles and generations, but you are looking at a PlayStation 3 version here, so you decide how it looks. Since it's rather on the low budget side, I think it looks quite fine for what it is, but there are a few gripes here and there. Sometimes there are frame drops, pop-up is the norm here, and the first time I saw these sprites I thought this would be the norm. It's not too bad in the long run, but once you notice it, then it starts to stand out. For example, here I kept looking at the obvious sprite even though there is only one of those around, at least on this track. But hey, at least the cars don't just look like cars with eyes like in Matter National. They look more cartoony, let's say, which is more in line with the original game, but not quite. So the game is split in various areas, from Radiator Springs Speedway back to Radiator Springs up to newer areas like Santa Carbarera. While Radiator Springs is by far the biggest area, and when driving to, for example, Taufin Pass, there are no loading times at all, Santa Carbarera is actually more fun to drive around despite its small size. The same goes for Motoropolis, the only map at night, and honestly this was the best map, and in a way it reminded me a bit, just a bit though, of Need for Speed Underground 1 or 2, or even The Fast and the Furious. But let me explain why. So with Matter there are quite a few, actually just 3, odd missions throughout the game, like this rocket launching thing or this weird matador one. But there is also one that seems like it was inspired by Need for Speed Underground, because the goal here is, well, to drift. Considering the whole vibe of this event, the music that I cannot play because otherwise YouTube will kick me where the sun don't shine, the nighttime, the colors, and also this last part of the track, which might or might not be a nod to the Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift, then you might understand why I initially thought about Underground or Underground 2 or even the Fast and Furious, yes, specifically Tokyo Drift. But RACE O RAMA needed more missions like the Drift one instead of the ones with this 3-wheel car. I think Flo was his name or something. It was Flo, right? I don't know, who cares? These were really annoying missions because this piece of shit vehicle isn't all that good to control. But it's not only a problem with the car itself, it's also a problem with the weird bounce effect the game added for whatever reason. Because each time you hit something, the car tends to bounce around a bit too much, especially this, tricycle. Even though this might be the most technical event type in the whole game, granted, because unlike almost any other event, here you cannot collect boost just like that. You can only do it if you collect these icons, and even then, it's random when you get boost. While in every other event you get boost gradually once you used up this bar completely. I don't even understand why there are so many events with this tricycle car or whatever, when there aren't enough events with other cars or other event types like the drift one. Heck, even the monster truck races were more fun than the tricycle ones. But at least finding the tires event with this Italian car, Mamma Mia, was reduced to just one, similar to this hard-to-steer police car. Don't ask me about their names, I have no idea. Incinerated Studios should have balanced the amount of events more evenly because some go for far too long while others are far too short. One thing RACE O RAMA does better than its predecessors is drifting, outside of the specific drift event with Matter. In a way it's easier to drift around, but the problem comes with this meter right here. Once you start drifting, this meter appears and with it you can control the drift. But the thing is that drifting this way feels kind of weird and it's kind of hard to have full control over it. A bit hard to explain, but I think this system should have been done in a simpler and more responsive way. One thing I also found to be a bit of a shame is that you can only drive around with lightning and nobody else. I am not talking about the single events themselves where you control the tricycle car or even Matter. I am talking about the events you have to drive as Lightning. I mean, sure, Lightning is the main character, granted, but it's a bit of a shame that all other cars only appear in events without you being able to play as them. Outside of these specific events where you control other characters, if you want to play as somebody other than Lightning, Flo or Matter, you can only do that in the arcade mode. And this mode is a bit bare bones. Each event from the main story will be unlocked in the arena, and sure, for multiplayer purposes it's fine, but there is nothing else to unlock or anything beyond that. But hey, at least here you can somewhat pimp your ride by not only changing paint but also changing bumpers, spoilers, etc. But sadly, these are only for the basic version of McQueen, while his upgraded versions, or any other car for that matter, gets, well, nothing. Kind of weird to not add at least the same upgrades for all other cars. Why? You can't even do that in the arcade mode, and that is really weird. Because it would be cool to change the bumper of Chick, for example, or even Flo, I don't know. But oh well. To make it short, this might be the best card game up to this point. Especially Motoropolis was quite fun to drive around. The game as a whole has more personality and a reason to exist, and even though it could have been better as a whole, it still was worth the 6-7 hours I've spent with it. And yes, I've unlocked everything in that time, so it's not a long game at all, especially when you don't necessarily need to do the extra events with matter or anything. If you focus on the main events only, then sadly it's a very short game.
Red is the color of the season.